Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Texas A&M Aggies Live, part of the Voice of College Football Network. I'm your host, Cameron Honesty. Back with me for a second straight week is Cannon Torres, one of the growing Texas A&M basketball, football, baseball, everything you know, recruiting analysts, very bright star in our community. We have a lot to talk about starting out today. Obviously, we will get to Texas A&M baseball's sweep. Loss. I mean, they were swept by number one Texas on the road last weekend. But first, we got two more basketball commits for new head coach Bucky McMillan. It starts with Marcus Hill, former NC State guard, also played at, I believe it was
Bowling Green.
Bowling Green for a while. He was also a JUCO. Thank you for that. Thank you for catching that. Very, very productive player, one of the better offensive guards. Had a little bit of a down year shooting the three. Obviously, I think he shot 45% from the field last season. So, kind of a guy that you can count on to get inside, give you some looks in the paint. Today, Tuesday morning, we heard that Bucky McMillan had landed his eighth commit from the transfer portal in Jamie Vinson IV, who obviously some people alluded having the fourth at the end of his name is a good sign for things to come, obviously, with AC Law and Wade Taylor, now the all-time leading scorer to part of the program. So maybe that's something good to come. He is a freshman forward, obviously played with the Longhorns last season. A player very interesting, was a three-star recruit in the 24 class, someone who can really do a lot of good things, just wasn't utilized 100% last season the way he should have. Obviously, he was a younger guy in a big pond with a lot of talented guys ahead of him. So he can stretch the floor. He's somebody who can shoot at a high level. And I think he's a perfect fit with what McMillan wants to do. We'll obviously have to see, but you can kind of tell the trend is that he's getting players that fit his system perfectly. And so what do you think of both those new pickups?
Yeah, so we'll start with Marcus Hill. Now, people are immediately going to point out a less than acceptable three-point shooting percentage, but that's only because he took only in the mid-30s in attempts this past season, only made about 8 or 9. So he knows what he is good at, and that is getting to the lane and getting up to the rim. He was NC State's leading scorer. Obviously, he gets 2 more years thanks to the new JUCO ruling. But Marcus Hill is going to be a guy where even in Bucky McMillan's system of, hey, we want to get down the court, we want to take a bunch of threes, we want to make a bunch of threes, he's going to be the guy that ends up penetrating the paint and ends up finding these open shooters, whether it's in the corner, pick and roll, top of the key. He's going to find these guys. Moving on towards Vinson. Now, he's an insanely raw prospect right now. Like you said, 3-star back in the 2024 cycle out of Oak Hill. He actually, fun fact, played in 2022 Oak Hill with Josh Holloway, who is now a member of the Aggies as well. So a kind of little fun reunion for these two right here. But he's a 6'11" guy, huge wingspan. I mean, this is a guy who has a lot of untapped potential that I think the staff was looking for, and someone who they could actually build up in their system and continue to try and find these guys that they can build on as they go from year 1 to year 2, looking down the line.
Yeah, and Vincent, when I kind of did a deep dive into his film, and a couple people provided some really nice quick clips of what he can do. Obviously, when you only play one season at the college level, and like I said earlier, he played for a Texas team who just had a lot of guys in front of him, so he played limited minutes. I think he only appeared in 9 games. Did some good things. Like, you showed off that athleticism, ability, like I said, to stretch the floor, and shot at a very high percentage. But, someone like Zach Clements, so one of my editors with USA Today, he's a big Kansas fan. And immediately when A&M picked up Clements, who none of us really knew a ton about, right? He'd been sitting on the bench for a while. We knew he was a San Antonio native. He had some connections, obviously, to the area. But he immediately told me, like, you've gained a potential star next season, and based on what he can do. And again, like Vincent, this guy can make plays when he's utilized correctly, and especially given the time to develop and given more minutes and that confidence boost. When you play for Kansas, there's got to be something going on of where you're just with a bunch of star players, a lot of former 5-star guys who may just play in front of you, a lot of transfer portal additions that, because Kansas is one of those huge landing spots for more of the productive transfer portal guys. I'm not saying A&M has gotten a ton of those this offseason, but it's just different, right? It's a different environment. So when he's now coming to a Texas A&M team where, as we're talking about Clemens, who's probably going to end up playing a lot more, and the way that McMillan can use his skill set, like Vinson, these are two guys that if you look at their, the point of our existence actually as sports writers, I would say, is to give you more in-depth context about, what these guys can bring. And we haven't done a ton on both these guys yet. Obviously, Vincent just committed, so we'll take time to watch his film more and kind of see what he can do. But I think that Bucky McMillan has already gained a lot of the trust from the fan base based on what he did at Sanford and what he did at the high school level. Of he can take these 1 to 2 star guys and turn them into double-digit scorers with high shooting percentages. And again, this is basketball. This isn't football or other baseball or other sports where the talent level is so different sometimes, because we've seen a lot of these smaller school guys in the transfer portal era. And we talked about with Florida, winning the championship this year. A lot of those guys were no names, right? From very small schools. Iona was a big name in their program. And again, these were under-recruited players who, because scouts believed they were undersized or they just weren't skilled enough or whatever, they proved that's bull, right? It just doesn't matter now, because in today's age, these guys are just under the radar a lot of the times. And we kind of saw go 360 here with the NFL draft, right? Going with like Shador Sanders, and a lot of people thought that he could be a top 2 pick, but then other scouts thought, we're not going to waste a top pick on him because of X, Y, and Z. It's just a different world in scouting today. So especially with basketball, I'm not saying don't trust them when they rank these players, but we're going to see with Texas A&M this year that outside of Mackenzie Macabo, who I'm going to butcher his name, but
you're good.
5-star, number 2 ranked player in the 23 class. You saw that skill set at Indiana. Again, he's playing at Indiana, one of the great basketball programs, averaging 12 points a game the last 2 seasons. That's going to translate to the SEC. I think that's going to be pretty seamless. And you'll see why he was a 5-star prospect. But guys like Josh Holloway and Vincent and others, especially Holloway, who, if we'd have to look at his recruiting background, it probably wasn't a high-ranked player. Maybe he wasn't even ranked at all. He's going to give you something off the bench. He averaged nearly 8 points a game with Sanford last year because he's a veteran. He's played a ton of games. And again, basketball is about reps. It's about how well you can shoot, how well you can pass, how well you can play defense. And I get that there's some talent barometers going to the next level of play, but the cast of characters he's assembled so far is, I'm going to be honest, I would put this team as an underrated NCAA tournament bid stealing team right now. And that's just with the players he has left. He's still going to add more, but he's added star power with McKenzie, and he's added a ton of depth. And, in his system, I've heard this from some people who are smarter in basketball than I am, that he could end up playing, a 3-guard system more often. And Macabo is probably more of that wing guy. And, there are issues with, they don't have enough depth in the front court, but adding Vincent today is a big deal, even though he's not the bulkiest guy, still 6'11". Federico, who I just saw, an outlet kind of put a prediction out there that A&M was a favorite to land him. That's not official yet, but at least that's kind of gaining steam. That's another very productive big. He's making gains and he's doing a fantastic job. And we said this last week that, there was still more to come, and you teased some stuff, but 2 key commitments in the past 2 days, just a week after gaining guys like Duke Miles. He's off and running, and he's going to turn this team, I believe now, into a fringe tournament team or better.
Yeah, like you said, the talent barometer that he's already put onto the team as of right now, luring these guys in for a year 1, I think in my mind as of right now, I would probably have it graded as a second 4-out type of NCAA team as currently constructed now. Now, this is not saying that they could go out there and land 5 or 6 other guys to fill out the rest of the roster with the people that are in the portal and then make that much better or worse. But for the talent that he has already acquired, and the staff has done a great job at talent IDing in such a short time with what they had, to find these guys that are going to fit right into the system seamlessly. Now, whether that is a Duke Miles, whether that is a Josh Holloway, who is familiar already with the system that he runs, and we saw he is a SoCon defensive first team and sixth man of the year. So he already has these guys that have fit the system and the mold. And I think you alluded to it too a little bit more, is we see these teams in the NCAA tournament, like Florida, for instance. You said Walter Clayton from Iona. You have Will Richard from FAU. Have all these guys from, we'll say not as power conferences right now, but you can find the exact skill type of player you want at any level. It's just a matter of, with the madness that the transfer portal is right now, how can you get them onto your campus? And I think that that's the challenge that Bucky and his staff have had to face so far, is finding the guys that were already in the portal with the time they had. And I know it was probably not a lot of time to begin with, but they have done a really consistent job of finding the guys and then getting them onto campus for the visits, getting them familiar with what he wants to do and how he envisions the program here in College Station a little bit more down the line.
Yeah, because we talked about that. For him to make a real impact in year one, it's real, like you just said. And I think that there's already been some really early predictions with tournaments and stuff that has come out as of late. And actually, you're right. That's kind of they're really a fringe second out type of team. And that's progress, right? That's a lot of progress to make it there from where they were, less than a month ago, where Chris McDermott was the only player on the roster. And bringing up Holloway, and that's why it's very interesting, because, a guy like Holloway, who's going to now be with a much more talented roster than he's been with during his Samford career, just based on recruiting rankings and, what these guys have done in the past, he's going to be able to, as well as McMillan, communicate to the rest of the players, this is how we did it at Samford, right? This is how we ran this press defense. This is how much energy you had to expel each time. This is what, this is why we like our bigs to pop out and shoot a three and kind of keep guys off guard. We're not just a basic offense and a basic shooting team like, let's say, Buzz Williams, to be honest. And I shouldn't say that because he just landed one of the top recruits. I mean, whatever. But it's going to be kind of a funny ride to watch Buzz Williams do different things, on the recruiting trail with Maryland than he did with A&M. But either way, they got the right coach for that. They got somebody who is not just going to bring the excitement, but he's going to bring a lot of wins and a lot of surprise wins that we used to see when Alabama became a team to watch. The way they played offense and the way they pulled off certain victories early in trying to blanking on the name of Alabama's head coach right now. But it's one of those things where when you have a brand new roster, but you have a lot of excitement, especially for the fan base completely behind you, it's going to help you. It's going to help you pull off that kind of magical season that's just going to add more momentum down the line going into the offseason, where then he's going to have full grasp of this program, more national appeal, and you're going to end up recruiting very respectable classes. And if you can already do what you're doing in the transfer portal, and like you said, he's already mastered getting guys on campus, keeping them there, signing them. And we saw that obviously on Monday and Tuesday. He has not failed at that yet. And if he can do that now, build a roster, have a lot of those guys return for next season, he's going to keep doing what the Floridas of the world are doing. You just keep adding talent every year, and that's going to get them to where they want to go in the NCAA tournament going forward.
Exactly. And I will say there is a little bit of breaking news, if you don't mind me putting it on here. You're on mute, Cameron.
Oh, yeah, sorry.
Yeah, so as of right now, just got word that Federico is on A&M's campus as of right now for a visit.
Okay.
he will be at the Texas A&M baseball game that is going on right now. Taking
Okay, with Lamar right now. Okay, that's something we did not hear yet. We had heard some rumblings that he had a future visit set up. So that is another big name. I mean, that's the thing. I think if you can land him, which for anybody who's watched Texas Tech, obviously watching them in the tournament, this was a guy who averaged, I believe, like 5 points a game this season, about maybe 4.5 rebounds, or maybe more than that. Great defensive player. One of those guys who, again, we talk about perfect fits and systems, would be a beyond perfect fit in what McMillan wants to run, and would end up solidifying that front court. I believe maybe they need one more player, but another 6'11" guy with a little more weight to him compared to a Vincent, obviously way more experience. And that's what they're lacking, is experience in the front court right now. Guys who have been there, especially guys with NCAA tournament experience. Obviously, Texas Tech had a really magical run this year, could have made it even farther than they did. So that's a big deal. Thanks for breaking that. It's always fun to have news kind of break when you're doing a live show. But outside of basketball, we are going to lead into some baseball. Obviously, one of the more disappointing weekends of the year, which is saying a lot, being how this team started SEC play, not winning a series until they beat then number 1 Tennessee on the road. I think you and I both kind of entered with the same expectations. I thought they'd at least get one win, especially in game 3, which, as we know, they led 4-2 until very reliable relief pitcher Weston Moss kind of had one of his worst outings, and then pretty much anybody who came in after that really couldn't keep the Longhorns away. Caden McCoy was the last pitcher they had that allowed a solo home run to Adrian Gonzalez. Is it Gonzalez? Yeah. Making it 6-5. Obviously, they went 3 and out in the 9th and were swept on Sunday afternoon. But you really have to go back to game 1 and the starting pitching. And, you know, it's really interesting because I knew coming in that Ryan Prager was going to give them, you know, enough, and he hadn't really done that a ton in SEC play. Obviously, a very high ERA for an ace. 5.2 innings, 3 strikeouts, 1 earned run, you know, and then you kind of go down the list of they lost 2-1 in that game. You go to Saturday, Justin Lampkin, 5.1 innings, 1 earned run, 8 strikeouts, only 2 walks allowed. You again lose, I believe it's 3-2. And then Miles Patton, who has been, you know, very, very consistent, very reliable as that day 3 starter. Again, 5.2 innings, 3 runs allowed, which one of them was an error, I believe. And then, you know, he just needed to get out of there. 5 strikeouts, just 2 walks. And in any of those starts, you can win, right? They're giving you a chance to win. And that's been the problem for, you know, most of the SEC, most of SEC play, outside of obviously their streak after beating Tennessee, then sweeping South Carolina and winning the series against Arkansas. It is fair to say that Tennessee and Arkansas, who have had kind of some wonky turnouts after A&M beat them, they haven't been very consistent. Texas does look like the best team in the country right now. They do have the best pitching staff. Credit to Max Weiner, obviously former A&M pitching coach, who is probably going to end up being a head coach in the SEC very, very soon. It's not embarrassing to lose to that team. I will say that. It's just the way it happened. And a lot of it is just the fact that, obviously, yes, it's the rivalry. You don't want to lose to Texas. Their fan base is relentless, and you're going to have to hear about it now until you potentially meet each other in the postseason. But you just thought this team had enough momentum to either win the series or just eke out one to get into the week and get a little more momentum, because now, and I wrote about it earlier this week, that they still have a very good chance of making the NCAA tournament. And that's the thing I don't think a lot of fans want to hear right now, and that's really what I'm getting to, is that when you lose the way you did by 1 run each game, and you knew that you were just a couple more hits away from winning the series and then going into the week on a high note, you now have to play number 2 LSU at home. So that's a positive. Missouri, who's the worst SEC team I've ever seen in my life. I mean, I don't know if that team's going to win an SEC game this year, but either way, you get them at home. You finish the regular season on the road against Georgia, who obviously is one of the better offensive teams in the country. You need 5 wins. They are about 8-12 in SEC play. You probably need, and I've heard this from sources, Kendall Rogers, obviously D1 baseball is pretty reliable. He said the other day that 13 wins is most likely going to get you in like that. And we can do the math that win the series versus LSU, win this, sweep Missouri, you're in, right? Maybe win a game against Georgia, you're in. Can they do it? I mean, I believe they can. It's just I kind of came away from that, and I don't want to draw on. I want to get your perspective, but I don't know if this was all emotional based. I don't know if this was a mental thing. We saw Jace Lavalette, who had one of his worst outings of the season. I believe he was 1 for 9 after being named SEC Player of the Week based on his performance against Arkansas. And a lot of people, including myself, kind of saw, I don't know if this team was ready to handle that situation, facing Jim Schlossnagle again. But get your take on that.
Yeah, I mean, overall, I feel the fan base was overall disappointed, we'll say, getting swept by a total combined of 3 runs. That kind of sums up the entire discussion, doesn't it? But going into that Friday, I mean, you and I talked about it this past week. We thought it would be this slow grind out game where either team kind of scores only 3 or 4 runs. Like you said, Jace did not have the most impressive weekend, and it kind of felt like the hits that A&M was actually getting up at the plate just weren't carrying over that wall. You could see a lot of them going back, a couple hundred yards, but it just didn't feel like it had the lift underneath. Now everybody wants to contribute it to nerves, emotions, everything like that. I think it really just came down to who, and I'm going to use the Jimbo quote, who executed better. And the fact is that Texas, the Longhorns did execute at home better than the Aggies did in this series. There was a lot of hope going into Saturday that the Aggies would just bounce right back, be angry that they only lost by 1 and come out swinging. And for the most part, they did come out swinging, but we did see a very, very talented relief pitcher for Texas come out for them and kind of shut down the rest of what A&M wanted to do in that game. And then Sunday, I think by that point, it was already, tensions were high. You saw the Gavin Cash stuff that happened in that Saturday game. You go into that Sunday game and tail of the tape, lose by 1 run again. So really just kind of a gut punch for the Aggie fans. But I think that overall, when you look at it, Texas is the number 1 team for a reason. They are good. So if you can, and it's not acceptable to say, hey, we lost 3 in a row to the rivals, to a number 1 team, and feel okay about it. But coming from, you went into Tennessee and got a 2 out of 3 win. You went against Arkansas, got that series win as well, and you're gonna end up losing one. Straight up, that's just how it is. There's no perfect team in baseball that I've seen recently. We'll say, but you're going to lose some. Now, it just so happened that you did lose it to the rivals, which is even more of an emotional loss than it would be. But I think tonight we'll see it again. I mean, they are playing Lamar. I don't know if we have a score update on that, but you're going to go into this weekend feeling quite okay with where you are and just kind of making it down this stretch towards Omaha if you can.
Yeah, they're up 3-1. Ben Royo has continued to be the team's MVP. He hit a home run to make it 2-1, and then he flew out to score Bender up for a 3-1 lead. They are in the top of the 5th right now, so it is kind of funny how Ben Royo, of all people on that team, has ended up being, probably the most consistent player on that roster outside of Caden Sorrell. And that's the thing. I agree with you. I don't ever really buy it. I mean, I did have a reason to believe that a lot of this was probably mental, because we do forget, and look, I hate to say this, but credit to Jim Schlossnagle after the game, because he just kept it businesslike of saying, I know this A&M team. I recruit a lot of these guys. I mean, he didn't say that, but you know what he meant. They kind of alluding to, I know who they are. I know they're talented enough, and I trust that early, and then we'll lead them to the postseason. Now, like a lot of coaches do that. We remember back in the 21 Texas A&M the 2021 Texas A&M basketball season when they kind of ran through everybody in the SEC tournament. They lost to Tennessee, and every coach was going, that team deserves to be in the tournament. It doesn't matter if coaches say it, right? You have to do it yourself. And it is going to be very interesting. I mean, you need to beat Lamar, obviously. You need to keep winning those midweek games, but all they really care about are your SEC wins. It is something to note that the way that they lost was actually better than the way that some other teams have lost to Texas at Dish Falk this season. LSU, who they're about to play this weekend, did not have a great showing. They did win the first game, but they got beat by, multiple runs in both and did not look good at all. LSU also was swept by Auburn, who, beat the socks off of them for most of that series on the road. And then LSU, I believe this weekend, won the series versus Tennessee. So this is just the SEC, right? This is just what it is. It is, I mean, Mississippi State just fired their head coach who, led the Bulldogs to a national championship less than 5 years ago. So it's never going to be perfect. I know that A&M fans, especially kind of, I guess they call them the 2%ers or whatever it is, of they're not really paying attention a lot to the details. It's just wins and losses. Oh, if you lose, you're bad. Fire Michael Early, tough stuff like that. But here's the thing. What they've done so far, picking themselves up from being in the dumpster fire they were of SEC play and beating some of the best teams in the conference, sweeping a South Carolina team that had its moments this season. It isn't one of the best, obviously, but doing that at home the way you did, especially the comeback they had in Game 3 of that series, and having one letdown that every team's had. It's just that A&M has had more of those. Granted, I just don't think it's fair to talk about when they were swept by Vanderbilt and in the beginning of the season, because this team wasn't who they are now, right? They just weren't. They didn't have Caden Sorrell back. They didn't have the identity, and I think they had a really good showing for all three games in certain aspects. It's just like you said. Texas made the clutch hits when they needed to. That's the difference, right? The pitching is great. They probably have the best closer in all of college baseball. That's great. I'm not surprised by that because I knew coming into this. I remember someone asked me, how good is Texas going to be? And I said, well, it's going to depend on the pitching. It's going to depend on how many good arms does Max Wiener have? Well, he's already proven. And I think Jim Slosnick would tell you, look, if I didn't have Max Wiener, we would not be 19-2 and close to setting an SEC record or whatever it is, because that's how important these positional coaches are. And in baseball, if you don't have pitching, you're not going to win a lot of games. So A&M can't blame their starters. They can't really even blame their bullpen, even though there were some home runs given up. And the fact that obviously A&M's only home run of the series in that dreaded park where I swear they're cursed there from getting home runs was Caden Sorrell, who is probably a first-round pick in the 2026 MLB draft, who just powered that thing out. And, getting to my point of what they need to do to get back to the postseason and kind of wipe away this terrible weekend that A&M fans don't want to relive is guys like Caden Sorrell, Jace Lavalette, and especially Bear Harrison. Caden Kent is another name who had a terrible weekend. Mr. Clutch became one of the more letdown guys every time he stepped up to the plate. They all know that if they don't play consistently, they're really it's almost offensive to your starting pitching, right? Because they're giving it their all right now. Like Prager was emotional. He was doing everything in his power to keep the score low. And I think the way they lost, I remember he gave a post-game press conference. You could just tell, man, he was just sad. Just like, what else can I do, right? And you don't want that to happen the rest of these series, because you don't want to be that team that, you're almost there, but, oh man, LSU hit a home run in the ninth, or you were up by 2 and now you're down by 1. You don't want to be that team. So hit the ball, consistently and allow your starting pitching to thrive, because you've got enough pieces to make it back there. I'm not saying this team is going to make some deep run. I'm not saying that this is a College World Series finals type of team. I'm just saying that what we saw against Texas, yes, it was a letdown. They lost, but I think A&M already proved that if they can get the job done in the end of the regular season, these teams can meet again, and it's going to be all the marbles, right? It's not going to be some semi-meaningless, meaningless for Texas, I guess, but regular season matchup.
Exactly. I think it's time for the Aggies to wash their hands and move on. And I think we're going to see a little bit of that with Lamar tonight. I know we had changed up the batting order a little bit for tonight just to kind of get a refreshing view. We did see Jace up first, and maybe that's something that someone smarter with baseball lineups can tell me. But what you really need to see is from these other guys, like you said, like a Ben Royo, Terrence Keel, we really need to see what is going to be the overall plus from them in those batting orders. And from what I saw pitching, it was incredible. The emotion that was brought out from Prager and all these guys that am I wrong? Prager was kind of the one that showed a little bit more emotion than.
They all did. I would say that I haven't played baseball in years, but I can think back that obviously when you're in a position that you have a game where you're on the mound, you basically give up nothing. Essentially, when you have had situations where you're giving up 4 or 5 runs, they have to pull you after 4, and you just kind of look at it damn, well, they can blame me after this. Especially in this series where you're going against the number 1 team that's proven they're one of the best. They haven't lost in a C series yet, and you give your team a chance like that, it's a huge letdown, right? I think that Lampkin and Patton, I don't know if they really spoke after the game. I'd have to look back, but I think they're happy about their improvement. I would say that Prager is the vet. He is the guy who could have gone to the MLB last year, obviously for when his contract with the Angels. But I think it's just he wants to get back to the postseason. He knows that it's going to take good performances from him combined with good enough offense to do that. So I think, losing your rivals, losing Schlossnagel, who obviously, recruited you, and it's just the whole emotional aspect of it. But see, that's the thing. I didn't even mention Royo and Terrence Keel. Obviously, I should, but they were great. They did their job. That's the thing. A&M's been like that this year, and it's kind of it's baseball in general, right? It's like when your star players aren't stepping up, somebody has to, and it's usually the guys who are kind of playing like crap earlier, and they kind of come back and are more consistent. Terrence Keel is not one of those players. He's been good all season, I would say. He did, he struck out in one of the games to end it, but he did have some key hits. He had a hit to give him a chance in the 9th in Game 3. So it's like if those guys are giving you enough, and your star players are giving you enough, then you have a chance against everybody. That's the thing.
Exactly.
I think fans get away from, who this team is structurally. They are still one of the best rosters in the country, and they've proven that. They proved that against Tennessee, South Carolina, and Arkansas. They pretty much dominated those series outside of one game each, right? And that's it. So we're too late in the season to start nitpicking and saying well, are they actually that good? It's like we're going to hear that a lot with A&M football next year because
exactly
we're going to hear they had such a hot start, but in October they kind of it's like it's completely different in that aspect because when you play in football, you play kind of an easier schedule. You play a tougher outside conference opponent. If you do well against them, it raises expectations. You go into conference play. If you have some letdowns against teams that kind of know you better, it's harder to gauge that team then because it's a completely different team because they performed against a program that doesn't know them as well. It's just that. So A&M has already told us who they are, right? And even though they didn't have the best series at the plate, they don't need us to doubt them anymore. We just want to see it. That's the thing. You just want to see. You want to see them put together a great series this weekend, get past Lamar. They're up 4-1 right now, if anybody needs an update.
Yeah.
And again, just live up to these expectations because this is the last year for a lot of these guys. That's the thing. You look at guys like Levelette and Prager, they came back for a reason. They didn't just come back to play for Michael Early, which, again, that narrative is getting tiring. But they came back because they knew we can get back to where we were or close to it with this roster and with obviously getting Wyatt Hensler on the team and getting Terrence Keel and getting all these new contributors. But yeah, it's it's just not that confusing to me, right? It's just do your job, right? Do your job. That's the most coach speak thing I can say.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, going back, I am watching on a different screen over here of up to date for this game, and as we were talking, Wyatt Hensler hits one over the fence. So you bringing him up, he has been. I really want to give Wyatt his flowers because he has been a great addition to this squad. For what Mike Early was trying to do this year, and I think that goes a little bit over people's heads with how the start to the season was. But I do want to give him his flowers.
Yeah, Hensler. That was the most frustrating thing I think a part of the entire weekend for me when I was covering the games. That wind, right? Wind is a baseball's enemy, and that was a grand slam.
It was.
That maybe would have ended the game. I don't know. But I remember I'll have to give credit to John Patterson, one of the best Aggie follows of one of the Aggie alums, who's just, he's just a great follow on X for anybody who wants another person to gain some perspective from. I will say he gives actually good perspective from a guy who obviously doesn't cover the team professionally, but is a baseball guy. He just said that's going to come back to haunt them, and I was like, nope, he was right.
No, he was exactly right.
You saw it just trail back, and you're going, he got a hit after, and he got an excellent hit that gave him 2 ribbies, but it's just one of those things. It's just one of those series. I'm glad it's over. I don't want to talk about it anymore. Obviously, they could end up playing each other again, but I think what you can kind of take away from it was that if you're just an outside baseball fan, it was good baseball. It was a good baseball series. Good baseball. And I saw, a lot of Texas fans gave A&M credit because even though they won the series and swept them, you can laugh and go, oh, we swept. It's like, well, you didn't sweep them like most sweeps go. It was very close, and it was obviously very hotly contested. And I think the biggest thing that it proved was that A&M belongs with the other big boys. It's just they don't have the record with some of them. And that's obviously going to be the biggest fault and why they have to obviously win 5 games over their next 3 series to just get in, probably as a 2 seed, I would think, in the regional round. And look, I'll say this. If this team comes into the NCAA tournament hot and let's say they win a couple series in a row, or at least win 2 and then, lose the series to Georgia, maybe win a couple games in the SC tournament, I wouldn't want to play them. I wouldn't want to play them because I know that your team completely switches when you get to the postseason. It's one of those things where you just got to get there, right? It's like the NCAA tournament in basketball. You just get there, just get to the tournament, and then it completely resets, and you can get back to the mentality you had last season when you made that College World Series run. I think that's really all we can say about baseball right now, honestly.
Right, exactly. People just gotta to wash their hands, get ready to watch.
I agree. No, that's the best term to say is like wash your hands of this, because look, I'm not gonna call it all Longhorn fans, but a lot of them are going to use this for the rest of the year of saying, well, anytime A&M fans make a joke, it's going to be, well, we swept you. And I guess they can use that. But I really want to see these teams meet again. I think that getting them in the summer and as pissed off as both of them will be, getting this out of the way. I kind of wish it was a little earlier in the season, to be honest with you. I get, obviously they would meet within the next month or 2 months or month. But look, it's one of the greatest rivalries in sports, and that's why there's a lot of hate between both of them. And, it's very entertaining, but they just got to get it. They got to get the job done. And if they do wash their hands and they get this out of their system, then I have no doubts that they will get back there. And we'll preview the LSU series maybe at the end, but it's one of those situations where you can look at LSU's ranking, but you can also look at Tennessee's ranking then and Arkansas's ranking then. It doesn't matter. And you're going to get them at home. And if you get in there and think, you know what, we've beaten a lot of good teams here, because a lot of it's a mental game. Yeah. And I will say that criticizing Weston Moss is probably a little hard. We did hear after the game he was dealing with some appendix issues, was not feeling the best, because I think all of us watched him get out there and look extremely the confidence level looked completely off. He just did not look like himself. Obviously dealing with some health issues. We hope that he's okay going forward, because he's another guy that's going to be a big piece to their success, because we know that Prager Weston Moss combination in game ones to get you off to a good start, which we'll probably see on Friday, that's going to be huge if they can make this run to get back to the tournament. All right, so last topic we're going to talk about today. Oh, so there you go. They are now up 5-1, by the way.
Oh,
Caden Kent, I think we're doing, I don't know, maybe talking about them is helping them because we just criticized Caden Kent.
It's time for them to get their bats hot.
Exactly. Yeah. Speak into the universe, my friend. But we're going to talk the football transfer portal, the spring portal, transfer portal window opened. It was last week, correct? So, yes, a lot's been going on. A&M's, and we talked about this last week, I believe, that A&M's primary needs on offense and defense, starting with defense, defensive tackle depth, adding a body or two more to that group. We saw that this defense in the spring game actually looked very good. Now, granted, it's a little hard to judge, being that defenses usually look better because they know the offense very well, vice versa. But overall, the edge group looks great. And, I just actually did an article about ESPN compared, was talking about who will replace A&M's A&M's recent NFL draft players. Shamar Stewart obviously went number 1 to Cincinnati. Who's going to be his direct replacement? The name they picked was Dayon Hayes, the transfer from Colorado, who has dealt with injury issues, had a very good showing in the spring game, and has I think he has over 12 sacks during his career with Pittsburgh. And but there's a lot of veteran depth at the edge group. So really on defense, outside of maybe another cornerback or maybe another defensive tackle, that's probably what Mike Elko's looking at. On offense, wide receiver has been the position trying to replace Noah Thomas's length, and red zone ability has been a topic. Ted Hurst was a name that was brought up. We all covered it. I remember I was getting intel from that A&M was pursuing him. He opted to stay at Georgia State, which was a little surprising, but in today's NIL world, even the Georgia States are giving out deals. but yeah, so that it's kind of interesting. You look at, so really focus on wide receiver. You kind of look at the players who are available, and it's really, you get a lot of 6'3" guys. You got a couple 6'4" guys. We're talking Jeremiah Noga from Oregon State. Donovan Hamilton, who he just actually committed to Ball State. Evan Haynes, who was a North Carolina transfer. A lot of these taller guys who could provide you what you need to replace Noah Thomas, but I just don't think it's that easy. And I think that this coaching staff is not doing what a lot of others do, which is just plug and play. Like, let's just find a guy who's just similar in height to what Thomas can provide. And then just let's put him on the offense and see what he can do. I think that we haven't heard a lot of what they're trying to do right now. And I think they're keeping it pretty closed off, because I think what they saw with this current wide receiver rotation and how they performed in the spring game, they may feel pretty good about what they have right now. I don't know if you've heard anything else. I personally have not. I think it's been very quiet with any transfer portal addition, but I don't know. I think maybe Isaiah Williams and Ashton Bethel-Roman stepping up the way they did, even though they're not, a Noah Thomas clone or anything like that. They're a little bit smaller, quicker wide receivers. Maybe that's the way they want to go, and then hoping that their 5-star freshman Jerome Miles will be healthy enough to give you that type of length and red zone efficiency.
Yeah, now as of right now, I haven't really heard anything on potential other visitors that they could have as of right now. I think it's kind of more along the lines of, let's see what we have. And I think not the spring game in particular, but the spring practices, I think they really assessed what they had, and we kind of saw it peak out a little bit in the spring game with Isaiah Williams and Ashton Bethel-Roman. Like you said, we don't have Jerome Miles back on campus yet. he's a late signee. Well, he did sign, but he's going to be a late arrival over this summer. But we didn't even get to see Terry Bussey as well. So I think the wide receiver room, like you said, is going to be kind of maybe a reassessment of what they have in the room themselves, kind of looking at it to where, hey, maybe we don't have this 6'5", 220-pound wide receiver that we can just chuck it up to 20 yards into the end zone or when we're in the red zone. But maybe that's not what we necessarily need. Maybe it is. Maybe they just haven't found the right guy to get on the roster. But I think what does give me a little bit more perspective is we didn't see a lot of spring entries into the transfer portal. I know we saw Eric Carner go in. I know we saw Ernest Campbell. But it's guys that you got all your guys to pretty much stay. And I think that is a little bit more hopeful than what A&M could have asked for. And I know back in the winter, you made runs at guys like Nick Anderson. You could have had a run at Ted Hurst were he to fully enter the portal. It's just that I think at this point, it's like maybe it is Jerome Miles coming in. Maybe we work with what we have, what we believe in, instead of having to try and insert a guy in the spring in this portal to come learn the offense in a couple of months. Maybe that's it.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. And that's the thing that I've kind of come to the conclusion with this. It's been this, and we could talk about, obviously, Carner leaving was not surprising. I was talking to one of my writers on staff, and we just said, look, I mean, this is going to be the case when they recruit so many tight ends. Carner is a very athletic, has a lot of potential, right? But he's going to end up probably going to maybe a Big 12 program or something like that and end up being a rotational guy and kind of fit better in those systems. But I think that they have a specific type with tight end now. And I think we saw that with kind of the guys they got to the transfer portal and what they have in recruiting, especially a guy like Keati Armstrong, who could play defensive end as well. He's just a big athletic guy. And I think they know that that they need you to inline block, and they also need you to spread out wide and play that kind of bigger wide receiver role for matchups, because that's Colin Klein is all about matchups in the passing game to obviously make Marcel Reed's job easier and get the offense to get those inches, as Jimbo Fisher used to say. But it is kind of interesting. I did write an article, I believe earlier this week, talking about the running back room, and so a lot of the there's a sector of the fan base. It's kind of interesting when you dissect, fans who are really engaged and what they're kind of thinking. And I mean, it's kind of interesting because we can only say so much of, everything's okay and the group is fine and, they got a lot of talent and depth. And then somebody kind of listening goes, well, do they? Because Le'Veon Moss is coming off of a season-ending injury. Ruben Owens is coming off of a season-ending injury. Both of them did not. Or Ruben Owens did. Le'Veon Moss did not play in the spring game. Obviously, that has to do with just keeping him out. I mean, he doesn't need to play in that game, obviously. But there is some sentiment that maybe they're not as deep as we think. I'm at the point where, and I talked about this with Carter Carroll's a couple weeks ago, that this is Ruben Owens' year. This is the year where he needs to live up to that 5-star recruiting grade that every person on the planet in scouting high school football, saw him as an elite back, somebody who's going to make an immediate impact. Obviously, injuries hindered him. He had a pretty good showing during his first season, but the time is ticking, right? And if A&M is going to be a balanced offense in the way that Colin Klein wants to run his scheme, then you're going to have Owens live up to that versatility, catching balls out of the backfield, making his cuts, finding those holes, and showing that upfield burst that we all expect from him. And I'm going to be honest, the spring game was a non-factor with the running game. It's very hard to even gauge if they've made a lot of improvement. That's unfair. Obviously, we're not at every practice, and plus, we're not seeing a lot of extended reps. We're just kind of seeing practice reps that they allow us to in this new kind of college football media relationship. So yeah, it's one of those things where I keep coming back to it is Le'Veon Moss going to be 100%? Is he going to miss some games to start? We just don't know. We've heard, he's on track, right? We don't know how much that means. And if that's the case, Reuben Owens is the guy. And then Amari Daniels, who obviously is just a nice piece. Obviously showed that last year when Moss went out. Doesn't have the body or the frame to play, that type of bully ball that Moss can play. But he's serviceable, right? He's serviceable. He can do what you need on third down most of the time. He can give you something in the passing game, but he's a little banged up, right? And then behind them, you've got freshman backs who have potential, but they're freshman backs. So, you kind of look at the transfer portal. There's not a ton of running backs out there that you would just go out. And plus, you are competing with other teams that need maybe a starting running back. They're going to pay them more in NIL. They're going to have a better recruiting pitch. And I'm not saying like Mike Elko and them are gaslighting us or anything like that. I'm not accusing them of that. But what do you think about the group? And do you really think that they're in good shape, or is this maybe a situation where they do need to go get maybe a guy with a year or two under his belt that can give them some solid reps and give them more depth if Le'Veon Moss isn't able to return right away?
So I kind of lean on the side of they saw what Le'Veon Moss kind of did as a bell cow style of back, where Amari Daniels was able to come in even with Reuben Owens hurt and say, all right, we feel really good about running the ball 58 to 60% of the time, which is what they did. I think they felt like they currently feel like that they don't have to go into the portal right now with how it looks and say, hey, we need a little bit more. They probably feel, and this is just me guessing at this point right now, because none of us know exactly what is going on in the coaching staff's head at this point, post spring practices and spring portal closing, because you don't want to bring someone in right now with the spring portal already closed now. You have 5 backs, granted 2 of them are, or 6 backs, granted 2 of them are like, hey, freshman guys. But you still have all these running backs that you had this past year where it looked really, really good. I think you just have to balance out the pass to run game at this point. And you're going to see a lot of Reuben Owens back in the backfield with split backs, and kind of how we saw out of the passing game with Terry Bussey back there as well. So you kind of saw Terry Bussey on the left, Reuben Owens on the right, maybe get a little bit of the halfback blast action up either the middle or the left side. So what is going to happen is, at least in my mind, is that you're going to see Le'Veon Moss come back, whether it's in the summer, whether it's by that first game, whether it's they hold him out for a couple of games. But we're going to see him come back, and I think what the staff is banking on right now is Le'Veon Moss back in full form.
Yeah, I think it's probably going to be a limited snap count situation. That's a great point you make, actually, that, if we'll obviously get more into kind of the scheme and stuff later in the summer of what they want to do. But yeah, I mean, they've done that. They did that a lot and it was very successful. And that's kind of how you keep these guys healthy. It's kind of how you utilize that depth. And I'm not saying that guys like DeAndre Ridden and Jamario Mora, who I'm very high on, I think that he could end up being a very versatile weapon, even in year one, if they needed to go to him and if he's ready to go. And I think that's the thing that some fans forget, is that this backroom was decimated last season. And I mean, you basically had AJ Denoda as your key backup at one point. I mean, it's just, you don't have that situation anymore. You also have EJ Smith. We keep forgetting about EJ Smith. Even I do. I remember it's not just me. It's a ton of Aggie guys. And I'm just like, you kind of forget that he has an extra year of eligibility. So you do have somebody who is semi-reliable, who you trust, and who can give you valuable reps. But again, this is Reuben Owens' time to shine. He knows it. We know it. And it's not unfair to want these guys to live up to their recruiting ranking. It really isn't, because I'll say this. I watched a lot of Jerome Miles high school tape. That's an elite player who, if he reaches his ceiling in college, we're talking about not just a number 1 wide receiver. We're talking about a guy reaching over the century mark, double-digit touchdowns. That's how good this kid is. So can he live up to it? Obviously, the Terry Busseys of the world and others, not sure. But They have a ton of skill on this team, and I just think right now adding another back personally isn't the greatest idea. I agree with you there. I think you feel good enough, and you're not in that zone where you have to worry about cutting other guys and filling up spot. And it's just they have other needs they need to address, and they have other areas where they kind of need to tweak some things. And we talked about Lyle Hemphill coming in to fix kind of the defensive technical issues with the safety group and the cornerbacks. And I think if you're feeling a little deja vu because again, the way they finished the season at 1-4, you have another coach on the staff to try to fix these issues that were the problem at the end of the season. Because I don't blame, and my former co-host Will Stone, our first show, we talked about Marcel Reed, that I do not blame Marcel Reed for the way A&M ended the season. I just don't. And it's the same with Texas, is that Johnny Barron, who was his worst nightmare in that game, was just a first-round pick by the Denver Broncos. So, I mean, come on, it's going to happen to even good quarterbacks. And so a better Marcel Reed, a more confident Marcel Reed, you have more depth in the back room now. You got Ruben Owens back for the season, barring any knock-on-wood injuries. But you should just feel better. And you got the coach there that's going to tweak these issues, that's going to get your defense to play more sound and not give up those chunk plays. Then we're talking about a good team. We're talking about a team that has a very rough road ahead of them, but it's okay. It's not you drinking the Aggie Kool-Aid or whatever, saying, well, I think they'll be improved just because, it's not. I mean, my entire job is not to tell you guys what to think. It's to tell you guys, look, from what I've seen on the roster compared to last season, even, they're more talented. They're better in areas they struggled last season. They're more adept to how you have to run offense, how you have to run defense. And I'll say it again. Mike Elko could have done nothing. He could have kept the staff like it was. He could have said, screw you guys. I'm keeping Jay Bateman as full-time defensive coordinator. I'm not going to do anything. Suck it up. He didn't do that. He made a change. He knew he had to make a change. He hears the fan base. He understands this is his job. So I'm not going to have a diatribe about this, but I don't think they really need to do much. If they do need to do anything, we already talked about that. Maybe add another defensive tackle, maybe add another cornerback to kind of stir the room up. We shall see. We're going to end the show today to congratulate all three A&M players who were drafted in the 2025 NFL draft. I kind of waited till the end to talk about this because I had a lot of fun. Obviously, I love the draft. I used to be in the scouting world all the time, so I love evaluating these guys. I personally think, you can disagree with me, but I do think Shamar Stewart was kind of the fit with Cincinnati right now. I'm not sure how Al Golden is going to use him. I think that he has a chance to be very good with them. Obviously, I do think that, putting him on the edge full-time, making him a full-time pass rusher, and fixing those issues he had of over pursuit, slow down when you get in the backfield, keep an eye on your target, and utilize that athleticism. I think he's going to end up, being a Pro Bowl type player. It's just, I don't know how fast it's going to take, how slow it's going to take. But I think Nick Scorton was one of the steals of the draft going to Carolina. I thought he dropped a little too far. And I heard a lot of people saying, well, he should have come back for another year. He would have been a first-round pick. Nothing is guaranteed. I just want to tell you that is not guaranteed. I mean, you can, and if you go back for another year and you get hurt, and then you gain weight, or you're not playing a lot, scouts are going to take that into context, and you're not guaranteed anything. So the fact is that he has a chance to thrive with Carolina. He's going to end up probably being a strong side linebacker, I think, in his first year behind Jadeveon Clowney, who signed a recent 2-year deal. Obviously, he's a veteran. He's already in his 30s, so Nick is the future at that position, and I think he has a chance to be a good contributor next season.
Shamar Turner, let me tell you that Shamar Turner's fit with Chicago is probably my favorite out of the three.
I agree with you.
I think with him being down low, right up the middle, kind of honestly around that nose tackle type of place where you can get down with it's a 4-tech kind of D tackle. Yeah. I think they could really open it up. And I know Chicago's had all this history with defensive linemen that they can just kind of plug and play at this point. But I really do think that Chicago gets exceptionally better with Shamar Turner on the defensive line. And maybe you can share your thoughts, but this is probably my favorite fit out of all three.
Oh no, I agree. I think that the A&M connection with I think it's like Carolina's becoming an A&M hub, which is hilarious because I remember I was watching my dad and I was writing the update on. I went, Damani Richardson is now a starter with them at Free State, which is incredible. I loved watching Damani, and I love that he kind of proved every scout wrong, which was kind of funny. But Bobby Brown is with Bobby Brown, right? Yeah, he's with them now, and yeah, now Scorton, and I mean, it's just an Aggie hub, and it's one of those teams where when you go to a small market team, I actually love that for some players who maybe don't want to be in the spotlight right away and they just want to work really hard and get to the point they want to. I think Scorton is one of those guys who probably pretty disappointed with his sack total last year, and that, after recording 10 with his last season at Purdue, and he only had 5 and didn't really show up in a couple of games at the end of the season. I mean, he chose not to show up. I'm not going to say that. I think that's unfair to him, but I think he has a chance to really live up to when he was considered. I remember the early draft mocks. I mean, he was like a top 10 pick at that point, just based on his talent alone. So he has a chance to really just explode there and have a great career if he does end up staying in Carolina. But I agree, Turner. I love it for Turner, because I think a lot of people kind of forgot about him. He had the injury. He didn't participate in the combine, didn't participate in A&M spring combine. And he was just kind of sitting there going, look what I've done in my A&M career. And I think it's a fun way to go back and look at when he was defensive end and he had 6 sacks and he was just wrecking people off the edge. His versatility is elite. And I agree that kind of 4-eye shade of the outside position that's become very popular in defensive schemes, especially 4-3 defensive schemes. He's going to thrive in that because he's got the big body, he's got the strength, but he's got the athleticism. So he could end up being a very productive pass rusher in his career, and obviously gives a lot in the run. And I think his personality is a perfect fit for Chicago. He's a tough dude. He's not afraid to scuffle. Obviously, they're going to tell him, we don't want to draw flags like you did at A&M in your final year, but look, personality is everything with these guys. It's how they play. So look, if you're Texas and you're celebrating the 12 picks and, you said, hey, fine. I'm going to be honest, though. I remember my mom, she was here too, and she's not a football person. And she was like, wow, Ohio State, they have a lot of players. But, well, they just won a championship, okay?
Yeah.
So it's like that always happens. And if you're a playoff team and you have a lot of veteran good players that are kind of, guys you could just fit into a depth chart. Texas had a lot of those guys, and they had a lot of star power too. But again, their quarterback went to the 6th round or something.
Miami, yeah,
Miami. So I can't even get into that. I mean, we'd spend an hour talking about the Quinn Ewers.
We really, really could. But
I think I read the other day he missed out on $8 million or something by not transferring.
Yeah, and I'll tell you what, I'll put a pin in it right now.
Yeah.
For me and Quinn Ewers, I fully respect his decision to go to the NFL and chase your dream. I think the legacy that he did leave at Texas is actually a plus. I think we're going to look back years from now and say that guy was Texas through and through, and I think that was the point. I think that
I agree with you.
Not only did he quote unquote bet on himself to go to the league, he wanted to go to the NFL, and I think it was at this point he felt the desire to go, and I really respect that.
Oh no, I respect it. I'm not one of those people. I like Quinn Ewers personally. I think he's a good kid. I think that the traits are there. Scouting quarter I laugh even thinking about this. There's been the whole discussion about Shedeur Sanders and another thing we're not going to talk about on this show. But when you scout quarterbacks, you could ask the most veteran scout out there. It's the toughest position to scout. There are no perfect candidates. Cam Ward is not perfect. Cam Ward is the most polished guy, and a lot of it has to do with the fact that he's thrived in a ton of different systems. The fact that he was at Incarnate Word, the fact that he was with Washington State, and the fact that he thrived in his final season at the highest level with Miami. That's what makes you the number 1 pick. That in today's age, if you can do that and you're a quiet, smart guy, you're going to be the number 1 pick. You're going to make $40 million in your with your contract. But Shador Sanders, I've been debating, for a year with that kid of like, is he good enough to be a top 5 pick? I'm not going to give my personal opinion here, but with Ewers, I get the whole like he was the highest ranked player ever. So was Kyle Allen. Okay, we all remember Kyle Allen. I remember Kyle Allen was he had the perfect rating according to 24/7 Sports when he committed to A&M. Hell, I was still in college or younger at that time, but yeah, it's not a perfect, it's not a barometer and connection of, well, if you're this in high school, and you go to college and have 2 decent years or 3 decent years, you're going to be a top 5 pick. It's just not like that. It's not how it works. Cam Ward was a 0-star recruit because he didn't throw the ball. Quinn Ewers threw the ball a lot, and he has a lot of ball skills. And I'm going to be honest, he could end up thriving with Miami. I will say that right here. I'm not going to because Des Bryant said it, but he could end up being a perfect fit if he stays healthy and if he learns from the coaching staff. And I'll be cheering for the kid, because this isn't, it's okay for those out there to cheer for other Texas guys because they're not even with Texas anymore. You don't want to see people fail because they're with your opposing, rival team. But it's an interesting pick. I thought there were a lot of interesting picks in this draft. But I'll say this for Texas A&M, I think Mike Elko should be very proud that after his first season with a team that you think Trey Zune or Maj Reed-Adams and Will Lee, they could have all gone. They could have all, gone to the draft and basically probably been picked in the first 3-4 rounds, I would think. But they came back, and that's why you only had 3. I think the 10 players who are going to be going to mini camps and stuff like that. Jade Walker's going to, I think he's with the Bears. There's a long list. Look, as we've seen in the past, A&M players end up making rosters and staying on rosters. So that's
exactly they do.
It's going to be a fun little exercise.
But it really is, and I kind of want to shout out the players that did go undrafted but did sign deals. So Trey Watson going to the Chiefs.
Yes.
Jay Walker, like you said, to the Bears. We do see Moose Muhammad go to the Panthers at a little bit more of that pipeline. I think that is really, really cool for him and his family to go over there. And then, of course, we got to talk about BJ Mays going to the Eagles.
And I think he's going to end up staying with the Eagles. I was so high on that kid. I think he should have been drafted. I think that he was at least a 6th round pick, in my opinion. I don't really get it. I think there's maybe a speed issue or something like that. But one of the most fun players I've watched, portal players, last year. I mean, if I think Aggie football, I think of the plays that BJ Mays made at the end of the season. But very happy for those guys. It's going to be fun to see what they do. Anyway, guys, fun talk, man. I hope to have you back very soon. You can follow me at Cameron Odyssey. Obviously, you can read whatever I'm writing, and my team's writing at AggiesWire at usatoday.com. That is Cannon Torres. You can follow him at Torres Cannon, and he's going to be giving you guys all the recruiting updates, and especially what we talked about today. To end, Federico is visiting right now. He's attending the baseball game tonight. That's a big deal. We should hear more of that in the coming days, how that relationship's going. We could be hearing about a potential commitment very soon.
That's the hope, guys.
All right, man. I will see you guys next week, and have a good night.